Thank you very much, Richard, for joining us. Now, look, some people might say, hey, you're incredibly biased, you campaign for Brexit. Of course you're going to say that it's not Brexit to blame. But, you know, the Germans over there, they're saying that Brexit is to blame a little bit. Some people are saying, actually, if we still had the imports of cheap foreign HGV drivers, then maybe we wouldn't be in this position. So is Brexit to blame?
Of course not, Patrick. Good morning to both of you. I mean, it's just absurd. There is a crisis of confidence in the government. That's what this is really about. Because people have basically given up being able to trust a single word ministers say about anything. And so when they say there's no cause for immediate concern and there's no crisis, people don't trust them anymore. And that's what's happened. So, and I do think, Patrick, that not your good selves, but the mainstream media, not helped by people like the Daily Mail on their front page saying panic at the pump. So what does everybody do? They essentially go to try and avoid that. So it's a self-fulfilling issue. And then the government has been completely asleep at the wheel in terms of responding to it. I mean, has anybody seen, I think we have a Prime Minister called Johnson, but we haven't seen him for so long, we may almost have forgotten. I mean, it's just ridiculous. This has got nothing to do with Brexit whatsoever. Yeah. The whole supply chain issue about lorry drivers also actually has nothing to do with Brexit. It's because lorry drivers have been they've been poorly paid, they've been poorly treated, they've had bad facilities, we've had huge bureaucracy, they haven't been able to get their tests updated. It's a whole raft of reasons, which has got nothing to do with Brexit. And let's remember, this lorry driver shortage is actually, it's Europe-wide. Indeed, I understand it's even worldwide.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say. Apparently, Poland itself has 124,000 HGV driver vacancies as well. Wow. But doesn't this just indicate a massive lack of foreplanning, essentially, by the government? I mean, how has it been allowed to get to this point? Or do you think, actually, the pandemic just massively exacerbated the issue?
You're completely right, Mercy. It's a lack of forward planning by our civil service, our government. They've known for years, they've been warned and warned and warned about the growing demographic ageing of our HGV drivers. And it's mainly HGV drivers, let's be clear, where this issue lies. They've been warned about the poor pay, the poor facilities. Big businesses have a huge responsibility here. You know, they took lorry drivers for granted because they could have cheap access to EU drivers, and so they didn't invest in British drivers, British workers, and bluntly now, the negotiating leverage is on the other foot. And I view this actually as part of the Brexit dividend, which is that, guess what? Great news. The lowest paid are receiving serious pay rises, pay increases. That's good news. British workers are benefiting, and bigger businesses, frankly, should stop whinging, they should stop whining, so should the CBI stop whining. They bear some responsibility on this because they saw it coming and they just wanted to try and always blame it on Brexit and not having access to cheap EU labour.
One of the things that you guys were in the Brexit campaign really tapped into was the disconnect, I think, wasn't it, between a lot of the mainstream media, between a lot of the mainstream politicians, the establishment, and actually what your average normal man and woman on the street thought, right? And that's kind of was a huge centrepiece of that Brexit referendum and indeed the Brexit victory. Is it a little bit depressing for you now to see that actually so many of the people are behaving in a way that, look, I branded idiotic before when it came to people filling up plastic bags full of diesel at a service station in Nuneaton or something like that, you know? I mean, that must be a bit depressing for you as a man who likes to have his finger on the public pulse. Is it an element of you a little bit annoyed with the public at the moment?
You're quite right. It is idiotic. Filling up plastic bottles is also seriously dangerous.
Yeah.
And that's a complete lack of common sense, as you know. But that's got nothing to do with Brexit. That's just, frankly, stupid behaviour by certain individuals. And I think this is a case where actually, with proper leadership, you know, from the Prime Minister saying, look, folks, we've just got a short-term confidence issue. You know, please be sensible. Please show some humanity and just fill up with 30, 35 quid's worth rather than 60 or 80 quid's worth. And then we'll get through this. It's just a few days. But that requires leadership. And a nation of lions being led by donkeys is where we're at. Whereas if you had a strong, confident leader that people could trust, then I really do think we would move through this really quite simply. You know, you had a minister yesterday saying, we're not going to call in the army. And that within a few hours, all of a sudden, they're calling in the army. But it's going to take 3 or 4 days. You know, it's just extraordinary, and it's an utter failure of leadership.
OK. Do you think that actually haulage firms can afford, in the long term, to pay people these wages? Are we going to see higher wages now as a result of Brexit, or actually is this just a short-term fix?
There's definitely high wages. It's happening literally as we speak. And I'm pleased about that. And if that means the big businesses, they might have slightly lower profit margins. Yes, it may actually mean in certain areas that prices go up. But, that is, in a sense, the negotiating leverage, as I said before, is now with the lowest paid, the least well off. And that is a good thing. It'll flow through the system. But I really do think that those industry leaders, those lobbyists, I really do think they need to take a good, long, hard look at themselves.
Yeah.
We saw this coming, but as I say, ultimately, it's good news if lorry drivers are being paid more.
And as a leader of a political party yourself, I do have to ask you, what is the solution then if you were in power to encouraging more younger, perhaps, people to train to be HGV drivers? Because it does seem currently the government's just sort of sticking a sticking plaster over it at the moment with offering these temporary visas. What would you do?
So I've been talking to lorry drivers recently, actually, about this. And what they want is not only is it pay, but it's actually the quality of the facilities. They've been really badly treated. Even just things like using WCs. Far too often, places that they would supply wouldn't let them use the loos, things like that. Sleeping in cabs, very long hours, huge paperwork and bureaucracy. There's the new tax regime called IR35 that penalises them. The lack of testing over the last year because all the civil servants testers were working from home, but the paperwork had to be filled out in the office. I mean, a load of this stuff. It just requires competence. And I think they need, the cost of getting a HGV license, for example, is really significant. It's thousands of pounds. Why is that? It should be 50 or 100 quid. We've got to give some respect, proper pay, proper facilities to a key part of making a nation and an economy work. And what we've learned in all of this in so many different areas, actually, it's some of the lowest paid in some of the most critical parts of our economy that keep the whole ship on, sailing.
Indeed. Well, Richard Tice,